It's approaching 4 in the morning, Israel Standard Time. We've also got our live feeds out of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv as well. Our continuing coverage, we're going to go nonstop with this story. We do have Alon Burstein standing by. Normally, Alon, I check in with you off camera, but I'm going to just roll with it tonight. You and I have talked. Your guess is as good as mine. How many times we've done segments on this war?
Hundreds. Let's just say hundreds.
Hundreds. Would you say this is one of the bigger news days in the past 2 years, if not the biggest?
Look, it is definitely one of the biggest news days when it comes to understanding what is happening in the war and where things are going. It is not yet at the point where we can say that this is the beginning of, Francis Fukuyama said, the end of history when the Soviet Union fell. This is not necessarily going to be that, whether we're looking at the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or even the end of the war right now. A lot of sides are talking about what is going to happen, and it is very, very clear that there's been a major leap forward with regards to a truce between the sides, the release of hostages, the release of Palestinian prisoners, and what everyone is calling the first phase of the deal. But that said, what I have been trying to scramble over the last several hours is to figure out, but what actually has been signed with regards to later on. Everyone's talking about the first phase. The first phase theoretically is supposed to be over in a week. What happens next? Everyone is very optimistic at this moment, but 24 hours ago, everyone was very pessimistic. So it's definitely a monumental news day with regards to things moving forward. And I hope that the optimism can continue into next week. But at this point, I'm still trying to scramble for information to see what actually is going to happen next week, to see is that optimism warranted.
Let's say somebody has cautious optimism about this. What are the chief reasons why somebody would have cautious optimism tonight?
So there's a couple of things to look at. You can have optimism over what has happened, first of all, depending on what you're focusing on, and second of all, even long term. If you're focusing on the release of hostages, which is one of the truly main facets of the war, main facets that has driven Israel to continue the war, far from the only one, but main facets that have driven Israel to continue the war. And one of the things that has really touched on people's human side. We have seen different people around the world react, whether they are very critical of Israel or very supportive of Israel. The hostage situation, hostages in general, I have to say, is one of the things that touch upon people. Very few people know about what's happening in Nigeria or Boko Haram. Everyone knew when those girls were kidnapped by Boko Haram. Hostages is one of the things that tends to touch people around the world, not just in relation to Israel, in general, also ISIS and etc. So with regards to the hostages, this is one of the days to be truly optimistic. Again, I will be fully optimistic and say this has happened when actually the sides publish the deal that has been signed. What all sides are saying, though, is that the 20 live hostages are due to be released by Saturday or Sunday, i.e. in the coming days. That is a true reason for optimism. At the same time, Palestinian prisoners are due to be released, whether you are in support of an Israeli or Palestinian side. A lot of these Palestinian prisoners have been found guilty of mass atrocities of terrorism. However, a lot of them also are arrested in the Gaza Strip on suspicion and other things. A lot of people would also be optimistic that that may curry favor with the Palestinian side towards possibly a de-radicalization or de-escalation. A lot of people will disagree with that. Either way, I'm saying if you're focused on the Palestinian side of prisoners or the Israeli side of hostages, there is reason for optimism. There's also reason for optimism with regards to the ongoing fighting. Israel has agreed to withdraw from where it is, its current positions in Gaza. It has not been published to where exactly. That is one of the big glaring questions for me as someone who follows the war, I would say daily, I'm going to actually say hourly, and tries to understand where fighting is happening. I cannot tell you accurately where the Israeli military is going to fall back to, and that matters greatly, not only for the ongoing fighting, but for the lives of the Palestinians in Gaza. So what we do know is there's going to be a truce. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. So again, all that is on the cautious optimism side. Where the caution comes in is a couple of things. First of all, with regards to the hostages, it is not 100% clear what about the bodies of hostages. There's 48 hostages that we talk about, 20 of them are alive. The deal theoretically was supposed to be for the return of all the hostages. I predicted, I think online with you yesterday, and in my own channel yesterday, I predicted that Hamas would release the live hostages, but not the bodies. Hamas has now said that they can release most of the bodies, but that they don't know the location of 9 of the bodies for sure. It has not been clear. Again, the deal has not been published. So it's not been clear what exactly is included. Everyone's talking about the release of the 20 hostages. It's not clear if Hamas is going to also return the bodies of hostages that it can find. It certainly is not going to return all of them, but the bodies of the hostages it can find, or if the bodies are a later phase. Some reports are saying maybe the bodies will be in next day. That is one of the reasons also the story is not over as far as hostages are concerned. Similarly, on the side of Palestinian prisoners, that is one of the main things. When Trump published the 20-point plan, I spoke to you, I spoke to a lot of different channels. I constantly said a glaring issue is going to be the identity of those Palestinian prisoners. Hamas is going to demand the top Palestinian prisoners, and they have Marwan Barghouti, Ahmed Sadat, Hassan Salameh, and others. They have demanded their release. Israel has said they are not going to be released. I don't know how that was resolved. If you had talked to me, and I think you and I actually did talk about 3 hours ago,
We did.
I said to you, this is probably going to be resolved, but both sides are really standing firm and saying, we're not going to budge. Trump then came out and said it's all resolved. I don't know. I don't know. Is Israel going to release Marwan Barghouti and Ahmed Sadat? That may lead to Netanyahu's government falling. In turn, has Hamas agreed to not have their release? That would be very surprising and would almost be a defeat as far as they are concerned. So we don't know. So that's a reason for caution. I will say that with all the optimism, Izzat Arishak, who is one of the prominent Hamas figures, put out a message a few minutes before I got online saying, we are still waiting for the final answer with regards to the list of Palestinian prisoners. That is the first time that I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You're saying actually it hasn't been fully agreed yet. Will it be? Probably. It will be very, very damaging for any side to now roll back on after Trump has said yes and said, actually, no, we're making the deal fall through. But I don't know. I don't know. So that's in terms of that caution. And another thing, and this is something we'll probably talk about a little bit more soon, the questions of what happens next. Let's say this all goes through beautifully. All goes through beautifully. The hostages are released, even the bodies are returned, Palestinian prisoners. Everyone agrees, everyone's happy. They love each other. It's all well and good. What's happening next week at this time when you and I are speaking? The Trump plan that I printed out in front of me, that's why I'm looking down, I'm looking at the different items. The Trump plan has a vision. It doesn't have an actual day-to-day outline of what's going to happen. Have the sides agreed to that, or have they not? We don't know. We don't know. And that's the reason for caution. There is a lot of reason for optimism, but there's also reason for caution with regards to the sweeping declarations of the war being over.
So we've been showing this post from Jennifer Griffin. She's Fox News's Pentagon correspondent. She says at least 2,000 Palestinian prisoners are to reportedly get released and exchanged for 20 living hostages, according to Israeli and Palestinian sources. Release is expected Monday. Agreement reached in Egypt, she says. Clarify something. A lot of our audience has this question. Why is one number so much bigger than the other? Why is it 20 hostages for 2,000 prisoners?
So there's historic reasons for this internationally, and there's historic reasons in the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Internationally, it is one of the realities that when a sub-state actor, typically a terrorist organization, in Hamas's case, a defined terror organization, but sometimes also just like mafia gangs and etc., when they hold hostages, typically what they get in return is more people from their side. It's just one of the byproducts. Fair or not fair, it's a fact. It's one of the byproducts that happens when it comes to negotiations between terror organizations and states. In 2020, the Trump administration signed an agreement with the Taliban in exchange for the release of 5 people that were held by the Taliban. The Trump administration released over 5,000 Taliban prisoners that were held in Afghanistan, either by the United States or by the United States allies. That's a typical thing when it comes to negotiations between states and organizations. In the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that is the same. This dates back to 1985. That was the first big deal that happened between Israel and a terror organization. And at that deal, over 1,500 Palestinian prisoners were released in exchange for 3 live IDF soldiers. Dating back to 2011, one IDF soldier, Gilad Shalit, is released in exchange for 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. It's just part of the way these negotiations tend to happen. There's a lot of studies that are done about this sociologically, historically, psychologically, politically, militarily, et cetera, which, anyone taking my class, if any of my students are watching, know that I can go on and on about. But if I'm just going to say factually, that just happens. That's just the way the quote unquote game tends to be played. Now, with regards to the Palestinian prisoners, there are some glaring things when it comes to the question of who they are. And in this, maybe I'll take a step back and let me just talk for a second about who are the Palestinian prisoners. Because everyone knows pretty much that the hostages, the Israeli hostages, were kidnapped on October 7th. A lot of them were IDF soldiers. Most of them were civilians. A lot of them, again, those that are now in captivity remain are all the living ones are men, but it was also elderly women and children who were kidnapped. But who are the Palestinian prisoners? What do we mean when we talk about Palestinian prisoners? Palestinian prisoners are those Palestinians that either are from the West Bank or from the Gaza Strip that have been arrested by the Israeli military. And that is an important distinction. They're not arrested by the Israeli police force. They are not Israeli citizens. They are arrested by the Israeli military. And that is very important because Hamas has asked for other prisoners, Palestinian Arabs who have Israeli citizenship, to be released. And Israel said, no, they are citizens. They're not part of the game. Palestinian prisoners are those actors from the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, and the range of the crimes that they are charged with vary greatly. A lot of them, obviously the life sentence ones, are the ones that led massive terror operations. Marwan Barghouti led the Tanzim. That was the organization that perfected suicide bombing in Israel between 2000 and 2002. That is those types of prisoners. Equally, it is Palestinians who are arrested on charges of stone throwing or on charges of insulting an officer. That is the range of all Palestinian prisoners. And that is the reason why, first of all, there are so many of them. And second of all, why there is this distinction that we often draw and Hamas draws between the heavy prisoners. Those are the prisoners that are the leaders of terror organizations. They're known leaders within the Palestinian movement. Marwan Barghouti has been signaled out to be the possible next chairman of the Palestinian Authority, and he's in an Israeli jail. He's often compared by Palestinians to Nelson Mandela, who, while he was in jail, was also seen as the hero and future leader of the people. And it also ranges to people that are in jails in Israel for a lot less charges. When it comes to that number of 2,000, there is also here, I will say, a glaring question mark as to who those 2,000 are. What we do know is that 250 of them are those that are sentenced to life sentence in Israeli jails. That means they are the heaviest of prisoners. Again, Hamas has demanded the top prisoners, but they are the heaviest of prisoners.
When you say heaviest, let's make something clear to the people. When you mean heaviest, what do you mean?
So yeah, sorry, that's a concept that's used both in Hebrew and in Arabic to mean the most prestigious. The ones that are seen, everyone knows. You ask anyone in Israel or the Palestinian territories who is Marwan Barghouti, they all know. In one side, he's seen as a hero, on the other side, he's seen as a terrorist. Everyone knows. He's a big name. Most of the people, the 2,000 people who are released from Israeli jails, no one knows who they are. They are people, obviously, they're important to their families, but other than that, they're not leaders. Marwan Barghouti, in turn, Ahmed Sadat, is not different than when Yahya Sinwar. He was released from an Israeli jail in 2011, and there is a reason that there were famous pictures of him being released as opposed to the other 1,000 people, because he was a big name. He was a heavy person. That's what it means, to be someone who's prestigious.
And by the way, that's the person who ended up being the internal Hamas leader, for anybody who doesn't follow this stuff closely.
Yes, I will say, Yahya Sinwar, sorry, my brain is racing today. You're absolutely right to slow me down. Yahya Sinwar was the leader of the Hamas movement, the orchestrator of the October 7th attack, and he was released in a deal for an Israeli hostage in 2011. That is one of the things that many of the critics of the hostage deal now are saying, you're releasing the next leaders of the next October 7th. That's the criticism that's coming from the other side. So when it comes to who are these prisoners, there are the 250 life sentence prisoners, and they include those top leaders, but they also include a lot of others that are leaders of Palestinian movements, leaders of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, leaders of the Tanzim. These are all leaders of different Palestinian factions. Earlier today, after this deal was already announced, Israel said it's not going to release those specific prisoners, those leaders. In turn, Hamas has said, we have demanded those leaders and we're awaiting the answer. At this moment, I cannot tell you, are they going to be released or not? Honestly, I don't see either side backing down, but I also know that neither side is going to want to be the one that foils the deal for Trump. So I don't know about that. In addition to that, beyond those quote unquote heavy prisoners and the 250 life sentence prisoners, Trump's 20-point plan, Article 5, says that 1,700 Palestinians who were arrested in the Gaza Strip are going to be released, including all women and children. That is vague on two levels. Number one, it's vague because it does not say if all women and children, Palestinian prisoners, children meaning anyone under the age of 18, all women and children, also from the West Bank, are released. That would be important. Hamas wants to show that it's victorious in the West Bank as well. It's not just helping Palestinians in Gaza, that's releasing prisoners from the West Bank. The deal is unclear on that. That statement said 2,000 prisoners. We don't know. Another important thing, again, after this deal was announced already, Israel said it is not going to release the Nukhba fighters. Nukhba are the Hamas commando units. They are the ones who participated in the October 7th attack. It is not mathematically possible for Israel to release 1,700 prisoners from Gaza and not release the Nukhba fighters. There simply are not that many Palestinian prisoners from Gaza that do not include the Nukhba fighters. So possibly Israel is fudging the truth, I'll say it that way, not saying what's going to happen because of fears of disruption within its government, or possibly that deal has been changed and 2,000 prisoners do not include prisoners from Gaza alone. But something there is not worked out yet as far as all the publications, and I've been following Arab publications, Palestinian publications, Israeli publications, and international ones. Everyone's saying something different, but no one is giving an accurate estimate as to how this happens. We're seeing blasts in Gaza right now. We can talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
And the reason why I keep on harping on this, I know for a lot of our viewers, it could seem like, okay, but these are technicalities that will be worked out. The issue of Palestinian prisoners to Hamas and to the Palestinian population is as grave as the issue of Israeli hostages to Israel or to the United States and to US President Trump. I know some people don't like that equivalency. It sometimes seems like you're making a moral equivalency between people who are arrested for terrorism and hostages. I'm not trying to make that equivalency. I'm saying as far as public sentiment is concerned, the idea of leaving important Palestinian prisoners behind touches upon Hamas and a lot of the Palestinian public, and as much as it would be leaving an Israeli hostage behind. So the issue of who is released matters greatly, and honestly, it's one of the things I'm concerned about is I'm not seeing that that's been worked out fully yet.
Let's talk about the blasts. Just yesterday, we were talking about the idea of sometimes, and Hal was on right before you, and he said this is common with every war. People, belligerents, they will get their last shot in before a potential deal is made. Is that what we're seeing more than likely, Alon?
I honestly will say we're not seeing that yet. If, according to some reports, and there's conflicting reports about what the exact timetable is, something is due to happen tomorrow at 12 noon Cairo time. There's different reports on what that is. Some reports are saying that's when the sides are going to get together to sign this. And some reports are saying, no. They've already agreed in principle. That's when the ceasefire takes effect. So those are two very different reports. But regardless, whenever it happens, when the ceasefire takes effect, that's when you're going to see the last blasts. I cannot overemphasize this. In fact, I was talking to friends and my wife and colleagues moments ago, and I said, I guarantee you that if the ceasefire starts tomorrow at 12, between 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. Cairo time, you are going to see at least 3 to 5 rockets fired from Gaza towards Israel. Why? Because, like Hal said, this is very, very common. Sides want to show we're not defeated. Both sides will always want to show we're not defeated. In Israel, one of the famous examples of this happened in 2006 when there was an agreement that was made between Israel and Hezbollah, the previous time that Israel invaded Lebanon. And when the deal was going to take effect 48 hours, Israel launched a massive operation to take over another town in Lebanon. This came under heavy criticism in Israel. Why are you doing this when you know that the war ends in 48 hours? But it was in order to get that last shot. When we had the previous truce agreements, when the first truce agreement happened between Israel and Hamas in November of 2023, the agreement went into effect at midnight, and at exactly 12:07, 7 minutes after that, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad fired one more rocket. And that's a way to say, we are still alive. And guess what? You're not going to retaliate, because then you will appear that you are escalating. So very likely we'll see that. And the reason why I'm emphasizing all this is because right now we are seemingly still 12 hours, give or take, away from that deadline. So these are not even the final blasts yet. These are not even that last accord. We're going to see that at the very last minute. What we're seeing very likely is, almost ironically, ongoing fighting. There was a report that came out just an hour ago that said now there's silence. We're seeing more of them now. Now there's silence in Gaza City, but half an hour ago, the Israeli military detonated another building there. Fighting is ongoing. It's ongoing while these negotiations are happening. Until the sides agree that a truce is in effect, there is also that impetus to still show that you're alive. But even more than that, there's this reality on the ground. You have Israeli soldiers still in Palestinian towns that are going neighborhood to neighborhood, city by city, street by street, and you have Palestinian operatives from Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and others that are in the next door street over. They're going to be fighting each other until they are given the moment they're given orders to stop. So regardless of a need for a final showdown, it's unfortunately just a reality of ongoing fighting in Gaza.
So we got this in. And by the way, I'll just mention that we continue to scour social media for any and all reaction from any of the relevant accounts, any of the leaders across the world. This was one thing that we saw from, yes, this is from Netanyahu's office. They sent this out on Twitter. They say Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump. The two held a very emotional and warm conversation, congratulating each other on the historic achievement of signing the agreement for the release of all the hostages. The Prime Minister thanked President Trump for all his efforts and for his global leadership. President Trump congratulated the Prime Minister for his determined leadership and the actions that he led. The two agreed to continue their close cooperation. And this is the last part I want to ask you about, Alon. In addition, the Prime Minister invited President Trump to address the Knesset. Explain to our American and largely international audience what the significance of being invited to address the Knesset is.
So I'll start from saying that the Knesset is Israel's parliament. The Israeli government does not have an upper house and lower house, so there's no Senate and Congress. There's just the Knesset, just parliament. So when you are invited publicly to address the Knesset, usually that's a very, very monumental event. That means it's not only a state visit where you come and meet the state leaders, the prime minister, the president, that is sort of ceremonial role, the leader of the opposition, but that means that all of parliament, which is in essence all of the country's representatives, are essentially required to come to parliament and listen to you. It is a major forum. Israel's a small country. When a big event happens in the capital, like a leader coming to the parliament, that is going to be something that essentially shuts down the country, that essentially gets everyone, 100% of the country will be listening to what the US president is saying. Historically, there's been a series of different leaders that have been invited to speak in the Knesset, but not everyone. Not everyone is invited. It's not as though whenever a leader comes to Israel, they automatically speak at the Knesset. It is considered an honor. It's not something that's just taken for granted as part of a state visit. And it is considered something where you are invited by the country to come and address the country. It's not that you're now going to have a press conference. You are addressing the nation. It's almost tantamount to a State of the Union, but it's actually done by a foreign leader. So that is very significant. With that, I'll say officially, an invitation has to be extended. And thus, that message was put out that Prime Minister Netanyahu invited President Trump. I would argue that the trajectory there was reversed. All day, the White House was saying Trump is considering going to the Middle East. Trump is considering going to Israel. Trump is considering going to meet the hostages that are released. And then the Israeli prime minister put out a message hours later saying, I've invited Trump to come speak in the Knesset. I'm not saying that what Netanyahu said is not genuine, but I'm saying that the idea that Trump wants to be there standing on the Knesset and be the one to usher in this new era of no more living hostages in Gaza, this possibly new era of an end to the war, and possibly new era as far as Trump is seeing it as even a regional peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Trump wants to be the one at the front stage. It's not different than when he was handed that note, very famously by now, by Secretary of State Rubio, and said, you want to be the one to announce the deal. So go approve the message now. Make sure you're the first one to announce it. Similarly, this is what Trump is coming to do. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have that stage or should have that stage. I'm saying that's how this was orchestrated. Whether Netanyahu is interested in this or not, honestly, I don't think that Netanyahu knows how his government is going to survive at this point. It very, very, very much depends on what happens next week at this time. Everyone in government, also the most extreme right-wing leaders in Israel's government, are in favor of bringing the hostages home. Whether they are or they aren't at their heart, no one could survive politically if they would not say they were in favor of that. The question of what happens next and at what cost, that's what they always say. We're all in favor of returning the hostages, but at what cost? If the cost is that Hamas continues to govern Gaza, then we're not. Then we have to keep fighting. That's the question. So Netanyahu's government is going to survive till Sunday. What happens after that? That's concerning him much more than if Trump comes to speak at the Knesset or not at this point.
So Alon, speaking of hostages and speaking of Hostage Square, we are getting a live feed from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Just a moment ago, we were hearing from, and it looked like this roving camera was going around and interviewing people. The time, Israel Standard Time, approaching 4:30 in the morning. Talk to us, Alon, if you can, about, and you know what, I'm also just going to say that I believe we were rolling on one of these families that just spoke moments ago. Let's play this out. I believe they speak in Hebrew. I'm curious if you can make out what they're saying and tell us what exactly they were talking about. Again, this happened just about 30 seconds ago. Let's watch real quick.
וואו, איזה מטורף, איזה מטורף. איך נושמים, מאיפה מכניסים אוויר, מאיפה נושפים אוויר, איך מעבירים את הימים האלה עד שהם יחזרו הביתה. איזה מרגש, איזה מרגש. אמא.
אפשר לעצור את השעון מאחורה?
משפחה רגילה. נחזור להיות משפחה רגילה, נתחיל לשקם את החיים של מתן ואילנה. אילנה השתחררה ביום ה-55 ומאז הזמן עצר מלכת, היא לא עשתה שום דבר עבור עצמה. והגיע הזמן שהזוג המדהים הזה, האוהב הזה והנאה והאהוב, יחזור לשקם את הזוגיות שלו, את החיים שלו. די, ונוני הכלב כל כך ישמח לראות את מתן, זה מטורף, שמישהו יודיע לנוני!
Alon, we had you, and me and you were both muted during that. What did you take from what she just said there?
You could have told me that I would have stopped trying to simultaneously translate. So that was Einat Sandgaukar. She became one of the iconic leaders of the protest movement. She's one of the people who was very innovative when it came to the families of the hostages. Her son is held kidnapped as one of the people who's still alive in the Gaza Strip. And she's one of the people who really became very, very outspoken when it came to criticizing the Israeli government, chastising the government for what they saw as torpedoing hostage deals and not moving forward with them. She was also very, very, I'll say, innovative when it came to how she got the public attention. She hung herself up in a cage above a main street in order to draw attention to herself. And thus, her relief right now in Israel is one of the bigger iconic symbolic moments when it comes to looking at the families of hostages. She's basically talking here about the relief. She says, we have not been able to breathe this entire time. 2 years we have been here and we've not been able to breathe. There's a clock behind her that is counting the minutes of how long people have been in captivity. She says this clock has become our life. And who she is hugging, I'm not sure if it's the sister of the hostage or the girlfriend of the hostage, but she was talking about the girlfriend of her son's girlfriend, and saying, for her and for us, 2 years time has stopped, and all we are hoping for is a moment where we can go back to just being a family again, not being the public stage face of the hostage movement, and instead being a family and rebuild our lives together. That is what she was talking about. She gave a different interview earlier today, I'll say, where she was saying, with all of the things that we have done over the past 2 years, and she has come to the States, she's spoken at the White House, she's spoken, I believe, even at the United Nations, at the EU. So with all the things we have done, we haven't actually given any thought. What happens when he comes home? How do you take someone back who's been held for 2 years in tunnels? All we are focused on is the fact that he needs to get out. And now we are thinking, oh God, how do we take him back? And that, for me, was an interesting moment of, she's become someone who anyone who follows the war knows that face and knows her as always speaking impassioned and confident. And it was one of the first moments of almost like breaking, of being like, oh my God, my son's coming home. What do I do? Who am I getting back even, right? Now, who knows what these people have been through? So it's been a very iconic moment to see her in this change in the Israeli public, I'd say, in the last several hours.
And by the way, we expect that when the hostage exchange occurs, it's usually the Red Cross that carries out the transportation, if you will. I was speaking with the Red Cross a week ago about the potential of this happening sometime soon. They say the way it goes is pretty much at the last moment they get word from both of the sides about where exactly to meet the hostages. They drive them through Gaza. Of course, we saw it live back in November of 2023 when it was a motorcade of Red Cross vehicles that made their way down into Egypt. Very, very possible that we'll see something similar here in the coming days. Hey, I got to play something for you really quick, Alon. It looks like President Trump just got done with an interview on Fox News. Sean Hannity asking him about this deal. Here's a little bit of it. We just have a quick little clip. Let's play this out.
All right, joining us now live on the phone is the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, wow. If you would have asked me 2 years ago yesterday if this was possible, I would have bet everything I had no. Congratulations, sir. Can you give us more of the details?
Well, thank you very much, Sean. It's a great honor to be involved in it. We had some tremendous help, as you know, with everybody from Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco, and we had everybody. JD, the whole group was just amazing, and the military was, as you know, very instrumental in getting this done. We have a great military with great leadership. The whole world came together, to be honest. So many countries that you wouldn't have even thought of it. They came together. The world has come together around this deal.
Okay, that's what we have of the conversation. It was a short clip, but I wanted to make sure we played out what we did have, Alon. Back out to us live here. We're starting to see images, by the way. This is live. Hostage Square. We're getting some visuals in. You know what? Let's pull up the audio on this. I'm curious what we can hear.
אבא של אלון? לשמור? To keep it? 5 דקות. רגע, היא ביקשה שנשמור לה על זה.
So we understand that there's more interviews taking place in Hostage Square right now. Let's listen.
ומתרגש לזה באותו זמן.
אני אגיד לך מה יהיה, אתה תהיה משוחרר, נשית, מהכלא הזה, שנקרא לחייך אבל. אני שמח שיצאתי, אבל חברים שלי שם.
כל רגע שאני מדמיין את השנייה הזאת של היום שאחרי, שהחטופים יהיו בבית ושהחיילים יחזרו הביתה, אני מתמלא בצמרמורת מכף רגל ועד ראש, ואני לא מצליח אפילו לתאר לעצמי עד כמה אושר אנחנו נוכל לחוות כעם סוף סוף. כעם, באמת נוכל לקום מזה. לתת מקום גם לכל האנשים שנפלו ונרצחו בנו, ולתת להם את המקום שמגיע להם, וכעם כולם ביחד נקום מהשבר והפצע הזה, ובאמת אין מתרגש ממני.
לא הצלחתם להרגיש את האושר הזה עד עכשיו לא?
עם עצם בגרון כל הזמן, עם עצם בגרון שלא עוזבת.
אין אושר אמיתי. אין אושר אמיתי כרגע.
זה הנאות קטנות, אבל לא משהו גדול ושלם כמו שכל כך ייחלנו לו מ-7 באוקטובר. זה מטורף להיות גם בצד השני פתאום.
נכון.
בצד שכל כך מחכה להם, כל כך...
ממש.
וואו, משתוקק לרגע הזה שהם יגיעו, אני מבין את כולכם, אני רואה את כולכם, ואני רואה כמה אתם מחכים להם, ואנחנו אוהבים אתכם כל כך. תודה רבה 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 לכל מי שפה. תודה.
You know, Alon, I didn't anticipate to have you play translator here tonight, but here we are. Can you give us a gist of what we just listened to?
So these are 3 people who were released from captivity. These are 3 hostages. Elia Cohen, I think couldn't quite tell, who were released from captivity in the different hostage deals. I think all of them were released actually in the deal of 2025. And they are talking about that feeling of the rest of the hostages coming home. You know, all of them were saying that, first of all, we have never been able to fully be free. We have come home, but we have not been free. And one of them articulated it in a very moving way, said, it has been ever since we came home, you're happy, but you're smiling, but you're relieved, but it's always this feeling of who you left behind that they were feeling guilty about, and that now finally they're looking forward to just being able to be happy at the fact that they're home and rehabilitated. It's also important to note that at least 2 of the people there that were just speaking in this video have been mentioned by hostages that are still held in Gaza in hostage videos. When they made hostage videos that Hamas published over the last several weeks, they mentioned, every now and then would say, Omri, you sat here with me, speak out, cry out. So as part of the messages that were sent from the hell of captivity, they were calling out to these people. And, you know, obviously that would play on anyone's emotions. And what they were talking about is the ability to come out again and breathe again and be rehabilitated or start the rehabilitation process. And one of them was also talking about, I think a few of these people were kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival, and they were talking about that desire to go back to Nova and to remember that it was about the music, that moment that turned into hell. Once everyone is out, they'll be able to go back. One thing that I'll say that is an important anecdote that one of them said, which is we're waiting for the hostages and the soldiers to come home. And that is one of the things that's going to become a very important political issue with regards to the future of the war, but also a politically divisive issue in Israel. If the hostages are brought home, do the IDF soldiers, does the Israeli military continue to fight Hamas, or do you live to fight another day and pull back? And they're saying they want the war to end, but obviously there are other elements going to be in Israel and in the Israeli government who want the fight against Hamas to continue. So that is also one of the interesting things, that for the moment, everyone is on the same side, but that such a statement of, and when do the soldiers come home, is going to become politically divisive, I would say, within the next couple of days already.
So before we started listening into some of and we do prioritize live coverage. So anytime we do hear anything coming from Hostage Square, we will do our best to tune into it while it's happening. But before, we had just played President Trump's, the beginning of his interview with Sean Hannity. Your takeaways from the little we did hear from President Trump?
So there's 2 things I'll say. One relates to the piece that we heard, and that is that Trump was giving a lot of credit to the people around. In that piece, he was talking more about the American side. Talked about Steve Witkoff, obviously one of the heroes and architects of these deals. Jared Kushner, also, he wasn't a major part in the previous rounds of negotiations, but certainly he was a major player here. Trump also talked about the military. I'm not sure what the U.S. military specifically had the part it played here, but he talked about a lot of different actors. But when he was talking about the other actors that were involved, it reminded me of something that was very glaring in that post that he initially put out on Truth Social when it came to announcing the deal. And there he said, and this was very interesting, that this is a great day for everyone, and everyone was treated fairly. It's a great day for the Arab world, the Muslim world, and Israel. That may seem okay, he's mentioning everyone. The order there, I think, is important. Historically, the United States has been very, very adamant that it sees itself as Israel's ally in the Middle East. And parlaying off of that, maybe negotiating with Saudi Arabia, negotiating with the different Gulf countries, its relationship with Egypt, its relationship with Syria. But Israel was always placed symbolically and de facto first. One of the things that have happened in the last month, and that relates very much to how this deal came about. We spoke about this yesterday, you and I, when it came to the attack that Israel carried on Qatar, the fact that now Trump has pledged to Qatar a defense alliance that's much stronger than the alliance with Israel. I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump said this was great for the Arab world, the Muslim world, and Israel. I think Trump is showing that he's still somewhat disappointed with the fact that Israel carried out that attack on Qatar. He didn't want this to go that way. It's one of the reasons that he has pretty much compelled Israel into going down this path. And when he was talking about everyone who participated, again, we only heard a snippet there, but Netanyahu and Israel were not mentioned as the people who are the heroes of this deal. And that is important. You know, a lot of symbolic things that Trump has done over the last several weeks when it came to developing the 20-point plan. He met with a series of Arab and Muslim leaders from Egypt to Jordan to Turkey to Qatar to United Arab Emirates to Pakistan to Indonesia before he met with Israel. That's not been done in the war. Previously, under the Biden administration and previously under the Trump administration, the United States would meet with Israel, formulate what is their plan, and then present it to the quote-unquote Arab side. Trump broke that. He broke that mold. It's one of the things that made us get to this deal very likely. He broke that mold and made it be, no, I'm actually coming in and saying, I can be also on the side of hearing what's good for the Arab side, and then go talk to Israel and bring Israel into accepting this. And I think that that's very important when it comes to Trump's relationship to who is doing what, and how are we thanking the different negotiators in this, and the fact that Turkey also was invited to take part in negotiations today. That was also something that Trump was almost throwing Turkey a bone. You don't need Turkey to join the negotiations half an hour before they're signed. If Turkey's joining, that's a way to say we want to give you the credit that you were also there at the end. All this is being done, and I think it somewhat reflects Trump's still anger over the fact that he doesn't feel that attack, he felt that attack that Israel carried on Qatar was an insult. He said that. And that he felt that he now has to sort of rein Israel in when it comes to how the war is being run. A second thing, sorry, I know I'm going on, but a second thing that was not said in that interview that we heard, but I did read while we were listening to other things, I did read a little bit more about what he said in the interview. He said something very interesting. He said that the hostages are expected to return by Monday. That gives us something. There's been all kinds of reports that the hostages will be released on Saturday or Sunday. There's supposed to be 72 hours when this deal is signed. But again, I don't know if that's at 12 noon in Egypt tomorrow or if it's already been signed. He said by Monday. He also said living and dead hostages. He didn't say all, but that does mean that the return of the bodies of hostages is expected, at least some of them, as part of this initial framework as well. And that's important because, like I said at the beginning when we started talking, that's a bit of a question mark about the bodies, the remains of the hostages.
So, looking ahead here, we know that there's been an agreement on phase one, but as you and I have discussed at length, there are still a whole lot of question marks as to how the remainder of the 20-point plan gets worked out. What are your chief questions going forward?
So one of the interesting things, and I'll say it's actually one of the unique things about the 20-point plan as opposed to the other plans and truces and agreements is that the 20-point plan is actually not divided into phases. Every one of the previous plans had phase one that lasts, usually was 6 weeks, during which time there was negotiations that leads to phase two that lasts another 6 weeks, and then they'll negotiate phase three. And we never made it past phase one ever. Trump's plan actually is not divided. Everyone's talking about the first phase. Trump also talking about the first phase. There's no clear division in the plan as to when one phase ends and one phase begins. The plan says that hostages will be released within 72 hours, and Israel will withdraw to a certain line. That line, according to what we've heard, has been renegotiated and is further away from Palestinian cities, more towards what Hamas wanted than what Israel wanted. That's rumors. We don't have the exact line yet. It says this will be as part of a larger operation of Hamas disarming, Israel withdrawing and handing over territory to a new international stabilization force. That force is supposed to be made up of Arab actors and American actors. It's also going to then train Palestinian police. There's going to be a board of peace led by Trump and with some position for Tony Blair. There's then going to be reforms in the Palestinian Authority. And all this is happening as the Israeli military withdraws and Gaza is rebuilt. The plan does not lay out phases. It does not say at what point does the Israeli military need to withdraw beyond this initial first withdrawal for the return of hostages. Does that happen within a week, a month, 2 months? Previous deal said 6 weeks. The plan does not say that at all. At what point, you and I spoke about the fact that it says that the Israeli military will hand over territory that is terror-free, free of terrorism, to this international stabilization force. Who decides if it's terror-free? Is it Israel? Is it Trump? Is it this international force? We don't know. A question that I think is glaring that almost no one has asked is who gets to decide who is part of that international force? It says it'll be made up of the United States and Arab actors. So, does the United States get to decide that, hypothetically, obviously this probably wouldn't happen, but hypothetically, Algeria, Libya, they can send soldiers into Gaza and Israel does not have a veto? Or does Israel have a veto? Who gets to decide, right? Logically, we assume it's going to be forces from Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. But without it being clear, that's a question mark. Israel may accept soldiers from the United Arab Emirates. Are they going to accept a Qatari military force coming into Gaza? Don't know. The plan does not say, and the plan does not specify how each phase relates to the next one. Does one have to be complete before the next one happens? All these are questions that were supposed to be worked out in the negotiations. Everyone's now saying phase one is completely negotiated and we've signed, and we're going to move forward. One of the things that Hamas was demanding in these negotiations is that there be guarantees that the fighting will not resume after the hostages are released. The hostages were Hamas's guarantee that the fighting will not resume after the hostages are released. There's conflicting reports as to if they got that. According to some reports, they have a guarantee from Trump, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt that fighting will not resume so long, this is the quote, so long as both sides are living up to their agreement. Is the IDF supposed to withdraw within a week and hand this over to the National Stabilization Force? Is that living up to the agreement? It's unclear. Maybe this has been worked out. As far as has been published, I'll say in almost any media outlet, because I scour most of them, as you know, we don't know. And that is the place that I think we can be very optimistic because, look, this whole deal came about a week and a half ago. Who knows where we'll be in a week and a half? So maybe this will be worked out in record time and Trump will compel all sides to say, just shut up and get it done. Or we will look at the hostages being released and then Hamas saying, but you promised this, Israel saying you promised this. And we may be looking at the sides with the return to violence about to spiral up again within a week. I really do not know in that moment.
Let's get to some more unknowns, at least what I believe is an unknown. I'm reading some more quotes from the Trump interview on Hannity moments ago. He said, quote, Gaza is going to be a peaceful, much safer place. Other countries in the area will help it reconstruct. The United States, will be involved in helping them make it successful. So is that giving us a little bit more context as to building Gaza back afterwards? We're talking far in the future at this point.
So on my channels, my first plug I'll do in the Israel-Palestine Report, my channel on YouTube, about a month ago, I did a video in which I discussed what was then a very, very vague economic plan. It was an economic plan that was rumored to be discussed within the, these are pictures, I think, these are now pictures from Gaza, actually. It says Hostage Square in Israel, but I believe that these are actually pictures coming out from Gaza that we're seeing.
You are correct. You are correct. It's labeled incorrectly, but those are images from Gaza. Thank you.
So we're seeing celebrations actually on both sides now.
Now it's back to Tel Aviv.
We're seeing celebrations actually on both sides, which
is
a rare thing to see in the Middle East. We have to put that out there too.
Hey, Alon, let's listen into the Gaza feed. We're getting this in right now. You know what? Let's listen. I'm curious if we can hear anything real quick. Let's listen.
طبعا الحمد لله على وقف اطلاق النار ووقف شلال الدماء والقتل، وطبعا مش انا بس لحالي فرحان، كل قطاع غزه فرحان، بل كل الشعب العربي وكل العالم فرحان بوقف اطلاق النار ووقف شلال الدماء. كل الشكر والحب للي وافقوا معنا ووقفوا معنا.
That's what happens with these live feeds. They were giving us taped playback. We thought for a moment there that that was live, but in fact that was our content affiliate, Reuters, playing back some taped playback from Gaza. Alon and I were listening to that. Alon, you caught some of that. What's the gist?
So it's the same type of celebrations. I will say that my Arabic is not as sharp as my Hebrew, so could not catch every word with the pace that he was talking, but it's the same type of celebrations. And one of the things he was talking about is that this war has engulfed everywhere. It has engulfed all the regions of Gaza. He was talking about the entire Arab world has been involved in this. And he was also praising and thanking the entire Arab world. And he thanked Trump also in bringing about an end to what he was calling the war that took over the Arab world. So that is really the sentiment in the street in Gaza. Very importantly, he was not talking about the return of Palestinian prisoners or things like that. These people in Gaza are just talking about a return to life, a return to an end to these blasts that meanwhile we were seeing while they were talking on the side view camera, we're seeing blasts in Gaza. So the celebration there is much more about the truce and ceasefire and an end to the ongoing fighting.
So, I had cut you off for a moment there. We were talking about the idea of Trump saying, and again, I'll quote, this is from his interview with Sean Hannity moments ago. He said, quote, "Gaza is going to be a peaceful, much safer place. Other countries in the area will help it reconstruct and will be involved in helping them make it successful." Does that give us at least a little bit more context about the White House's thinking of how Gaza will be rebuilt?
What I was saying is when I looked at this plan from a month ago, this was an economic plan that was being developed in the White House. And again, this is before there was a 20-point plan. This is when the fighting was still raging on, and it would seem to be a very futuristic idea. And this idea was that Gaza was going to be handed over, that's a quote, handed over by Israel to the United States as a trust for 10 years. And the United States was going to look at it as a development zone. It was going to look at it as a development site. It was going to draw in mass amounts of investment from private entrepreneurs from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, United Arab Emirates, lots of other different countries, with the idea of rebuilding Gaza into a thriving economic zone. And in the plan, you could really see Trump's vision, right? This is how Trump views the world through the prism of real estate, through the prism of economic development, and looking at the fact that this will bring about prosperity, and that prosperity will bring about de-radicalization and peace. The plan talked about everything from smart cities that are run by AI to a Elon Musk development AI center, to railroads that connect Saudi Arabia and Asia all the way to the Mediterranean that then allow goods to go into Europe. It was all very, very developed. None of that is seemingly going to happen because large parts of that plan involved relocating Palestinians. It involved Palestinians either being relocated in Gaza or being given economic incentives to leave. The 20-point plan explicitly says that no Palestinian is going to be forced to leave Gaza, that anyone who leaves will be allowed to return, and that Gaza will be developed for the Gazans. So the way the plan is developed now, it's not the implementation of that economic plan, but the thinking behind it, the idea that the way forward in the future is not necessarily through emphasizing a political resolution of a two-state solution. Well, the plan talks about the two-state solution, talks about Palestinian state in 2 sentences as a future aspiration, but instead looking at the economic development of the region, looking at rebuilding through international investment, and looking at through rebuilding and investing in the prosperity of the region as a way towards fomenting de-radicalization and getting people to see the merits of a peaceful coexistence is something that has existed always in the way Trump views conflict. This between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the way he resolved that conflict is promising both of them economic deals with the United States. The way he looked at India and Pakistan, the way he looks at most of these things is give people enough economic incentive and chances are you can de-escalate the fighting. Will that work in Gaza? There's more question marks as to if that'll work because none of those other conflicts, while they all involve ethnic conflict, none of them involve a state and then in turn a people who are demanding to separate and become a different state. So that's a very different type of conflict when it comes to a fight over territory and actual recognition. So a lot of people, a lot of Palestinians, when Trump started to propose his visions of prosperity leading to peace already in 2020 in his vision for peace, Palestinians were very critical of it. Now with what has happened to Gaza and the extent of ruin that has happened and the devastation of people's lives, it's going to take a few generations before the people of Gaza are able to get over what has happened, if one can ever get over such a thing that has happened in the Gaza Strip. Possibly now the sentiment will be different and there will be more openness to the idea of economic investment in order to rebuild. But the fact that Trump is likely viewing this, or I'll say this, I don't have any evidence to say that he's viewing this instead of a political resolution, instead of a two-state solution. But I'll say that in the 20-point plan, there is a lot more discussed about the economic redevelopment of Gaza than there is about a political resolution and self-determination of the Palestinian people. Possibly that'll work in the short term because the people there just need some respite and just need some rebuilding and some mechanism of survival, and that requires massive investments internationally. But long term, it has been proven that that doesn't resolve the conflict. So I think that that will go a very, very large step forward with regards to de-escalating the situation. But long term, the political situation is going to have to be resolved one way or another. Again, if it's not two states, maybe it's one state. But it's going to have to be resolved. The limbo state that Gaza has been in has proven to not be sustainable, I would say, even if it would undergo massive economic growth.
Alon, we thank you so much for joining us for the full hour here. We want to mention before you go that you are the host of the Israel-Palestine Report. Go subscribe to Alon if you want more analysis like you've seen tonight. He does this stuff on a regular basis. Anything you want to say about the channel or anything you want to say about tonight's happenings before we let you go?
So what I'll say about the channel is I upload my summaries there and all these interviews and other interviews I do with other channels. You can find them all there. And really what I try to do is just bring the most accurate news that I can get on the ground. I also do special theme shows. So if there's a specific theme, like the humanitarian situation or things like that, often I hear from comments and I try to do that. What I'll say with regards to what is happening tonight, this is definitely a historic moment. We're almost 2 years to the day to the launching of the war. It is definitely a historic moment, but it is very important that people also note the specific nuanced details. The fact that the plan is being presented right now as peace in the Middle East and we're all moving forward, it could lead to that. But for the people that have been engaged in bitter, ethnic, nationalistic, racial, religious conflict, the small details about the identity of who's released, the stage who's released, what lines people withdraw, can make or break if you continue to fight or not. So be optimistic, but pay attention to how things are developing. That's my advice to how to read this current situation.
And you can go subscribe to the Israel-Palestine Report on YouTube. You can look up Dr. Alon Burstein as well. Alon, have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you, Austin.